Welcome to DenverScript. We do this meetup once a month. You're here for June's meetup. Sorry, I'm distracted by the dog. Let's kick things off. I want to talk to you a little bit about code of conduct before we start anything. We would like to supply a harassment-free community. So if you find yourself violating any rules listed at this code of conduct list, things like be excellent to each other, no harassment, you don't speak over other people, that type of thing. If you find yourself or anybody else violating these rules, let us know, because we would like to give feedback about the behavior, expel someone if need be, hopefully not though, and just keep everyone safe, happy, and included. So our main ground rules for today will be kind. Please do not talk over the organizers or speakers. If you are really connecting with someone, obviously we want you to be able to connect, so feel free to jump outside out front, or there's a room up front by the door that you probably saw, and you can chat and exchange information or whatever you need. During QA, which will happen in between talks, we're going to ask that you ask constructive questions. Please do not try to prove a point or ask a gotcha question. Our speakers work really hard to prep those talks, and we want to support them. We want to ask questions that kind of broaden the conversation, not kind of zero in on anything in particular about the speaker or what information they supplied, opinions, that sort of thing. We are live, so if in the next month or later in the year you can't make it, you can always check it out on DenverScript Meetup on YouTube. And we will ask that when asking a question, be sure to get the mic. It's the spatula of speaking, right over here. That way, everyone who is watching live can actually hear the question, and they get to hear your voice and know that this is a room full of amazing people. And it says me today. This didn't refresh from the update, but it will not be me. Who is running QA today? I don't remember. It can be me if need be. Either way, one of us. We are sponsored tonight by Code Talent. This is where you are currently. This is a technical talent agency. CJ likes to give their kind of former, I don't remember the word, description. They're technical recruiters that know the difference between Java and JavaScript. So if you are looking for a gig, feel free to hit them up. We are also sponsored tonight by jam.dev, so thanks jam.dev for the pizza. We used to have a video to show for them. Are we doing that tonight or no? I don't think so. It's not here, which is why I ask. No, check them out, jam.dev. Adorable logo, that's worth it alone. If you would like to sponsor, please hit up our email. We would love to hear from you. We run this meetup, but it can't be done without some cash for food or whatnot. So we would love to hear from you. We are also looking for speakers, and every single person in this room could be an amazing speaker. I want to give a little pitch real quick. You don't have to be an expert on something to give a talk. You could give us a talk on something you learned recently, or your opinion on something, or walk us through a journey that you had working on something or learning something or a project. Anything basically related to JavaScript would be wonderful to come talk about. So I encourage every one of you to submit. You can go to DenverScript.com. There's a little button in the top right corner. Has you fill out a form. If you want to do a talk, but you are nervous about speaking, please reach out to one of the organizers. We've got Ched, we've got Marlena, we've got CJ, we've got me. All of us have speaking experience. We would love to guide you, help you practice whatever you need to get comfortable and ready to speak at a meetup and maybe eventually a conference. All right, it's time for the news. I'm going to pass the mic over to Marlena.
needs a strong word. Oh, just you wait, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Marlena. I'm one of those their organizers. Now I'm going to talk to you about the JavaScript news for the month. This is the stuff that I found interesting. You can go to DenverScript.com, and if you go to the JS News, you'll find an archive of the news that we've shared at each meetup. So if any of these interest you, don't break out your pencil, don't be snapping pictures. You can just go hit up the website, and you'll find a link ready for you. So I can't see. The State of Front-End 2024 survey is live right now. I've already filled mine out. But if you're interested in having your voice heard in this survey, now is the time to do it. It is, I don't know about less than 10 minutes, but it is right quick. And on that topic, the State of JS 2023 survey has its results. I like the State of JS survey a lot. There's so much to dig through here. I'm not going to dig through it all. I love how they combine data. So like experience with Webpack versus sentiment about Webpack. And those kinds of comparisons. I don't know how to read this, so I'm not going to try. I loved the library tier list. That was a really fun addition for people to rank the libraries that they use. And like retention versus usage. So it's a really fun read to see like what the trends are, what people are feeling about various things. Is there some technology in here that everyone's excited about that you've never heard of? Like that's a great opportunity. And to learn more about like the demographics of the JavaScript community at large. I find this page very interesting as well. So check that out. I know that question is in the State of Front End. As far as the other tools, I mean AI tools, here we go. Which of these AI tools do you regularly use to help you write code? Like ChatGPT and Copilot way outnumber none of respondents. You always got to remember the sample size is those who respond, but I do think that's very interesting in seeing which ones are popular and which ones are maybe upcoming. So for Dino fans, the stabilization process for the standard library has begun. We're not going to deep dive into that one. There's the TypeScript 5.5 RC now. There's been some progress on TC39. And the WebAssembly JSPI has a new API. There's a lot of fun technical detail in all of these that I'm not going to be able to capture right now. So we're going to jump into the articles because there were some really fascinating articles. Oh, yeah. How's that? Nice. All right. How React 19 almost made the internet slower. I thought this was fascinating to think about. Like, the technical problem presented is its own little thing. Basically, that they were planning, 19 wasn't released yet, to change how suspense works so that it would fetch sibling components within the same suspense barrier in waterfall style rather than simultaneously, which of course will slow down the actual like load of all your content. I'm not going to dive through all of this. It's a really fascinating read. I recommend that you check it out. But I think it is an even more interesting opportunity to think about changes to these major frameworks and how they can impact the web as it exists right now. Obviously, there's an upgrade step for any application using React, and I hope that everyone watches what happens when they upgrade their frameworks, but I'm not confident that everyone does. So I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. There's a whole lot of like how the interconnectedness of the community impacts the internet. Like how a single vulnerability can bring down the JavaScript ecosystem. And again, really fascinating deep dive into a vulnerability in NPM, and it's been reported and hopefully will be fixed. But it's a cache poisoning attack that they discovered, thankfully white hat, and there wasn't actually an impact to NPM as of yet. Also, what happens when an NPM library goes commercial and suddenly is paid instead of free? That can be a really big impact and impact the open source ecosystem. It's not like this is the first time it's happened, but I thought it was a really interesting case study. And then my personal nerdiness as a former typography nerd, coding handwriting. It's so cool, read it. Like literally took their handwriting and generated it using code. Like not made a typeface, but purely out of code. Super fascinating. And then this is just because I had to hear it, so do you. And I think it's honestly a delightful way to enjoy your passions. This is a song about TC39. Hopefully.
I get so excited writing JavaScript. I'm pretty easy going, but now I use script. When I first began, I was in callback hell. Then I met you, and now it all goes well. I love you when my tests pass. Meet me in the moonlight and extend my class. You.
All right, for time, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I just needed you all to know that existed because it's so fun. All right. We've got some resources, a good guide to Node.js's test runner, live types and TypeScript, some hacks in creative coding. This one's really fun just to even look at. Chrome extensions, VS Code extensions, and ESLint configuration migrator that you all might find really useful. There is a superset, I don't think that's really the right term, but a tool that's being built on top of NPM, the JavaScript registry, that I think is going to be really interesting to keep an eye on. We've got a 10 years of Vue video from Evan Yu, and some great follow-ups from various conferences. And I wanted to leave some time to talk about upcoming conferences. React and Chill, which is going to be August 22nd, fully online, is still doing call for papers until July 20th. Conf22 JavaScript 2024 is accepting papers until September 30th. JS Nation until July 1st, as well as React Summit, so those you've got to be snappy on. And then React Advanced, I should have taken that one off because they're not accepting papers anymore. But you can still think about going to the conference. Again, not going to talk about this release list, but there's been a lot of things released in the past month. Everybody's hiding in their house coding because it's too damn hot. And that's the news today. I'm going to hand it back to Cass.
Right, everyone. Hello again. We are going to bring up our first speaker, Drew. We'd love to have you up. While we're getting set up, please feel free to replenish on pizza or drinks or use the restroom. And in case you're wondering where those restrooms are, there are two, one on this left-hand side of the kitchen bar and one on the right-hand side. Feel free to replenish items as needed, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. All right. Hello, everyone. Let's kick off with our first talk. I would love to pass the mic over to Drew.
Hello, everybody. Is that good? Is that a good distance from my mouth? Tonight, I want to talk about PRs and trunk-based development. How many people here enjoy reviewing other people's code? It's more than I expected, but good for y'all. Y'all are doing the hard work out there. I personally am not a fan. I hate reviewing other people's code. It's just I get out of context. I have to get into a different state of mind, and then switch back to what I was working on, and that takes up a lot more mental energy than I like to expend when I'm working. How many people here are familiar with extreme programming and trunk-based development? So a few of you. That's awesome. The last several years, that's the primary method I've been working in, mainly for an ag tech company and through a consulting firm that was big on agile practices. And this is primarily how I worked for several years. And I'm kind of go over how that worked, what the day-to-day was, and why I like it so much more than having to do PRs. Big thing with trunk-based development is you need small, frequent commits. You need to have a high level of trust with the other people on the team. And I do want to point out that this is really for a closed source team and not really for open source. I don't see another way around PRs with open source. This will be primarily for enterprise applications. But small, frequent commits and a high level of trust between everyone on the team. And the idea is when you pair, you still get two sets of eyes on all the code going into main. And you don't have to do the asynchronous workflow of, I got something ready, push it out there, wait for someone to review it, and then merge it in. You just push it all directly to main. And if you're doing extreme programming with test-driven development, and you have good test coverage, and you have a good continuous integration server, then you don't have to worry as much. You push it in, everything gets ran, and if something breaks, the build breaks and it doesn't keep going. Our workflow would be, we get in the morning, you pull the latest, you rebase whatever changes you have locally, and you run all the tests, make sure everything passes, and then you start working on and if it's a new feature, you start with the feature toggle. Everything new that goes into the code base sits behind a feature toggle. So then everything that gets pushed to main is always ready to go to production. That's a big proponent of it. And so that way, when you get stuff integrated, it's not just hanging out on a branch. It's not sitting out there for a week or two or for a few days. It's going to the main branch every day, and it's getting exercised in production way before it ever gets actually used. And as long as you're pairing, you still get the ensuring the quality with two sets of eyes on everything. Is everyone following all that? Is that making sense? For me, I found this worked for the team I was on, this worked a lot better than doing the PRs. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about pairing benefits. I feel like this helps a lot with onboarding new devs onto a team, especially the dynamic of more experienced folks with less experienced folks. I feel like that's the sweet spot, because then someone who's less experienced asks questions, makes the more experienced person kind of rethink their development practices, what are best practices, why those are considered best practices. Kind of makes the more experienced people think about why we do things the way we do, and change things if necessary. That's just how we've been doing it. You make a good point, let's switch it up. With two experienced folks, you end up with two people who are kind of a little bit more set in their ways. You don't get a lot of that fresh ways of thinking into the, I don't think it's as innovative as the more experienced and less experienced pair. And then 2 less experienced, you can sometimes end up with the blind leading the blind situation. And if everyone's pushing directly to main, that can get to some hairy situations. I also feel like pairing constantly also helps with holding people accountable for writing tests. Like when you get a lot of pressure from the product team, you want to get stuff out there, you want to push features out as fast as possible. Tests, I've noticed, are usually one of the first things that goes. And when you're pairing, you can hold each other accountable to writing good tests and making sure that any code that goes in has good test coverage. Because that's going to keep us, that feels good, that feels safe to keep the code quality up, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. And then the big thing is, I think pairing does a good thing with reducing the context switching, which I mentioned earlier. There's an exercise, and I've done a longer version of this talk where there's like an exercise that shows how much time context switching actually takes up in your mind. Like doing the ABCs in order or out of order in groups of 10 or groups of 5. And it takes a toll. And I don't know how many people out there have ADHD, but context switching with ADHD sucks. You get one route and you switch directions. It's hard to get back over to what you were working on. It's not my favorite thing. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. If anybody has any.
All right, thanks for the talk, Drew.
You're welcome, Taylor.
So in this case and in your experience, when you do this style of programming, do you do 100% pairing all the time, or is there also some single, like, by yourself work that happens?
There's gonna be some time when you're by yourself during the day. Like before you start working on anything, though, you pair and talk about what you're gonna implement, how kind of design what you're gonna try to implement, and then sometimes it makes sense to split up and execute. If it's more, I think if you're with someone who's more experienced and someone who's really green, someone who's really fresh, you probably want to pair all the time. You probably don't want to let them go off on their own as much, because you're pushing directly to main, and the idea would be everything you push directly to main, if it's not ready for production, then it's behind a feature toggle. And so it shouldn't be exercised in production, but everything should always be ready to go.
Good question. What other questions?
Hey, thank you. That was an interesting talk, interesting process. So you mentioned everything's behind a feature toggle, so you can kind of push whatever to main. But how do you think about what you like the scope of a single commit to be?
Sorry, can you say that again?
So, sorry, am I holding this well? How do you think about the scope of each commit? Like, can they be really small and partial? And you're just getting this flood of constant commits, or are you like working on a single branch and then merging it as one commit?
I like doing really small commits, really small, frequent commits. It might not be done yet, but as long as it's behind a feature toggle, does it matter? As long as that's going to be off and it wouldn't be exercised in production anyways. It's better just to get it in. And then it saves you a lot with merge conflicts. Like, you don't end up in conflict hell. And I'm sure all of us have been there, where someone else changed something as you were changing something, and then you pull something down, and then it's like, oh God. And that introduces a lot of risk in resolving all those conflicts.
Another good question. Oh.
What strategies do you use for feature flags?
For what?
For feature flags.
For feature flags, I've used a config file on the back end, just a config file on the back end that then pushes all the feature flags to the front end on like a config call at the very beginning when the app starts up. I've used like feature toggle libraries with Spring. I feel like there's a ton of feature toggle libraries out there. Just whatever makes sense for what your code stack is, I think. And being sure when the feature toggle's turned on in production, you got to delete the feature toggle. Don't let them live longer than they need to be. Because how many times have we turned off feature toggles? Not often. I've been developing for 10 years, and I can't remember a time that we actually went back and turned something off. We just fixed it and then pushed it out.
Awesome. I think maybe we have time for one more.
Hello. I'm curious how often you switch pairs, like per ticket, per feature that you're working on. You're chained together for a month, something like that.
It depends on the size of the team, but I was on a team where there's like 12 devs, and we tried a couple different strategies. One of them was every 3 days we'd switch. Like you'd have like a story czar, and one person would own the story, and then the other person would just roll off and swap up that way.
So you could switch like mid-ticket when
Yeah.
it's not done yet.
Yeah, and I was not a fan of that. I was like,
Yeah,
I
that
want
would
to
be
work on
hard.
something and I want to finish it. But we tried doing that. Breaking up pair marriages was a thing.
Awesome. Great questions, y'all, and wonderful talk. Let's give a round of applause. You all have another couple of minutes if you need to replenish pizza, drinks, use the restroom, whatever you need as we set up for the next talk.
Hello. If you are connected to the Wi-Fi, please disconnect for now, because neither of us have internet, so thanks.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for your patience. The internet is misbehaving. I would love to introduce the next talk, regardless of the internet situation. I'll pass it over to Brooks.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to my talk, which is going to be about Docker. So first off, how many of you have heard of Docker? All right, almost all of you. Okay, how many of you have used Docker? Okay, pretty much the same number. And how many of you would say that you're like beginner level or like need the like beginner introduction talk for it? Okay, about a quarter. And then how many would love me to go like a little bit deeper into it? The rest, all right. So I didn't write the deeper into it talk part. So maybe what we can do is do some questions, then we can dive into those as part of that. So as we sort of mentioned, I don't have internet right now, which I ran the demo stuff beforehand. So as long as my computer decides that it doesn't need to go out to internet again, we'll be fine. Although I can't show you like Docker Hub right now and all that other fun stuff. So let's jump into it. So our objectives for this talk is going to be what is Docker, but I think I can safely skip most of that because you all know you have all like used Docker. How can we use Docker? Now for me, I use it for reducing onboarding time, creating similar environments locally as on production, and also to keep my local environment really clean. So let's just go ahead and skip this because you all know what that is. Plus, for those of you who know what this is probably a trigger because everybody knows that it's not a VM, but it's my favorite way to describe it to beginners. All right, how can we use Docker? So reducing the onboarding time. Well, I had this like first use some basics. So images. Now I had this like finding images, which was going to be this website, which is hub.docker.com, which is basically where we can go to find any of the public images. There is a way to have a repository to have private images, and for example, I use Amazon's, AWS's ECR to host some Docker images there. It costs something like, what, 25 cents per registry per month or something like that? I don't remember exactly. It's not super expensive, but it's one of those, like, if you're just doing it on your own, why not use Docker Hub, because it is free. There is some security concerns for using Docker Hub, mainly that if you're using Docker Hub for just any image whatsoever, that is arbitrary like images that you're pulling down, and it could potentially do stuff on your computer if you're not careful with it, especially if you decide to hand it access to all of your system. Like if you want to say, hey, you know, I want to give you like some kernel files, or I want to like volume mount in my entire home directory. That is questionable if you're working with an unknown image. In here also, I would have loved to show the difference between running on a, the difference between just anybody's image and also how you would find out what like an official image is, like one from Docker itself. One from Docker itself, and then maybe another one from the official open source projects, because that's like a differentiation that Docker now has. They basically say this is an official project, meaning that Docker trusts that project, but then we also have Docker themselves made it, or at least they're inspecting it and making sure like they're putting their name on that. And I don't know how many of you like have feelings for this, but I feel that Docker actually solved the namespace problem way better than almost any package repo out there. I love it. And I would love to like hear your guys' thoughts. Is like, how do you like their namespace system? Which is just one name if it's just Docker, or username / name of the image if it's somebody else. It's like one thumbs up, a couple thumbs up. You like it? Yeah. I wish that everybody else would do that. Like, I don't know why. NPM, I wish they would have started with that. All right, running an image. For the video, for everybody who may not know Docker, who's listening to this later, we can run Docker with the just Docker run command, right? So if I were to just do, let me create a new tab here. We'll just do oh wait, I don't know if I'm able to run this because I don't know if I pull down Ubuntu locally. So we're going to do Docker run Ubuntu. Let's make it automatically remove after I'm done with it because I don't really care. I want it to be interactive, and then attach it to my terminal. And so if I do that, yeah, I don't have that locally, and I don't have internet. So this is not going to work very well. So obviously you need internet when you first run Docker type stuff because, well, I don't have this. It's now attempting to go out to Docker Hub and then pull this down. But obviously, it can't actually reach Docker Hub. Now, if I were to take a look at what I have locally here, well, I do have a Postgres image. Actually, I have a bunch of Postgres images. I have the Hasura GraphQL engine. You'll notice that the names, based on what I said before, Postgres is a official image from Docker. Hasura GraphQL engine is from Hasura project. And then I have some of these nuns here, which are really interesting. They're created automatically for me behind the scenes when I'm running some Docker Compose type stuff. So I don't really need to worry about them too much. They also get deleted for me automatically when I take down and rebuild the Composer application as well. All right, let's let's continue on. Keeping our computer clean. This is one of my favorite sort of tricks and usages of Docker, which is no longer do I need to just install random stuff on my own system. Oh, I guess through Docker it technically is still my own system, but it's now containerized. It's contained in essentially a sandbox. And that means, oh, I want like 200 different versions of PHP. Well, that's okay. I just have 200 different Docker images for the different versions of PHP. I want 15 different versions of Postgres. I want MySQL. I want other databases. All Docker containers. Then now I don't need to worry about accidentally leaving a exposed, database just running on my system, and I have no idea that I configured it with a default password. I just run those in a Docker container, and then I can just quit that or just don't have it auto restart at reboot, and now I don't need to worry about it. Side note, I do reboot my computer every night, so that way all those images I don't have to worry about turning them off. They just sort of go off on their own. Now, my example here, I have two projects. I've actually been working a lot of different projects for what I've been doing myself, which I do a lot of Twitch streaming and I'm building courses. And so I build a lot of projects that people are going to work on. And every time I do that, I use the latest version of whatever languages I'm using for them. So in this case, I have a full stack to do course, and I wrote a backend in Node.js Express. So at that time that I made this, let's see what version of Docker I required. So if we take a look at my Docker file, that'd be Node 14. It's a little old. But I don't need to worry about anybody who's running that to maybe run into problems with the newer version of Node simply because they haven't decided to arbitrarily install a really old version of Node. It just will work for them as long as they run the Docker run command. Let's see about this one over here. Let's see, that's, I switched to a different, folder. So now I have to go find, I think, let's go to this one. This one, Node 20, a little bit more modern. So this version of Node, and anybody going through this project will actually be able to work with their local version of Node if they had installed it. But again, 2 years from now, when they're running this project or going through that course, I don't necessarily want to have to always be updating for them, all the versions of Node and everything else. They'll be able to just run whatever works with it, and it just is fine. All right, reducing onboarding time. This is another really awesome side that we can use with Docker, which is how long does it take for all of you to get new employees working with your code bases? More or less than 1 week? More than 1 week? Yeah, a few hands. Less than 1 week? All right, about the same. So I've noticed in companies that I've worked with that if you have everything Dockerized, you can get them up and running with your tools in 1 day, in less than 1 day, in perhaps just hours. Because it's Docker. It should just run on everybody's systems as long as they have Docker installed. And then they can just run the appropriate commands. You share your .env files or any other secrets that they need, and they're off and running. And it's usually going to be longer to get them to actually get their computer than it will be for them to actually get the entire project up and running. I've actually known people who can take multiple weeks just to figure out how to get the main application compiling on their own system, which is a huge waste of time. And that's just, we hired these people, right? We're paying them, and then 2 weeks and they still can't run their code? Come on. So the solution for this is Docker Compose. And I like this a lot because we don't need to share Docker commands with them to say, okay, I want you to run this command to start up a database, run this command to start up something else, now start up something else, and then, okay, now start the main project and hope that you all put them on the right network and everything else. Docker Compose just does this all for us. And I believe I have a Docker Compose in this project. I do. So, how many of you have used Docker Compose? All right, only about half of you or so. So, if you haven't used Docker Compose, I highly recommend it. Even if you're only running one service, it makes it from the startup command that you run to just like one line, like maybe less than one line. And it's super easy to share with everybody else. They don't even need to know how to use Docker. You just say, okay, paste this magic command, Docker Compose up, into your terminal, and you're up and running. Don't need to worry about it anymore. So in this case, we have services. Now, you may notice, if you're used to older versions of Docker Compose, that I don't have a version in here. And that's because Docker Compose, which another website I would have loved to bring up, Docker Compose decided that they did not need to make version a required field anymore with version 3. It is now, you can put whatever value you want in there. It doesn't matter. It's going to be version 3 now, unless you put like an older, like a version 2, which is kind of weird because it means that you can't use that field to for future updates. I'm not super happy with Docker for that choice. So I just leave it out now because I don't really think it adds anything for me. So we have services. Each of these are going to become Docker containers that are running for me. So in this first one, I have the database itself. And I'm just saying, here, the image I'm going to use, it's the Postgres image. I can give it the tag, latest. You can also set a specific Docker file to build from. So in this case, down here in the app container, we're going to build the Docker file, and then I tell it where the Docker file can be found. Back up to here, I can also give it environment variables. So in this case, I'm saying I want to enable the Postgres password environment variable, and then I'm just going to use the keyboard cat environment, which is the most secure password you could possibly use for your database. Obviously, this is for local development. We would never want to push to production with this specific environment variable. Now, there is a way to use external environment variables for this. I can just do env file, and then hand it the name of an environment file, in like a .env file, and you can use that and share that with your coworkers and have secrets now. And you don't need to commit those into your repository. We can have health checks in here in the case that you don't have a health check inside of the Docker file. If you do have a health check inside the Docker file, then it's going to use that one specifically. So the one in here, health check, I'm just having it run the PSQL command to make sure that just the database is up and running. I've had a lot of trouble trying to figure out how to write a decent health check for Postgres specifically that actually works, because Postgres goes up and down several times in the image as it becomes a container, and that's really hard to write something that consistently works. And if any of you have one, I would love to hear it, because everyone that I've tested, there's edge conditions that just break magically, which is not fun. And then finally, I set up volumes for this. And these are container volumes, essentially, back when container volumes were a thing, where I have a non-ephemeral storage on my computer where it's going to mount that into the container and let that data sit. This means that after I reset everything, my database still has its data. I don't have to reseed the database every single time I start it, which, that's kind of a Docker thing, right? We want our containers to be ephemeral. We want to not feel any negative things about when we just shut them off and delete them and delete all the data for it. But databases kind of suck with that, because we can have a lot of test data in there. And if we have to, every time we restart it, also reseed the database, rerun our migrations, do all that fun stuff, that's not fun. So we use the database volumes, well, just volumes specifically for that. And then you'll notice I have this named database volume here. Down at the bottom, we can just name what those are. This is YAML, so we get fun stuff like where I have just database volume : because I'm just using the default for the volume settings, which is just nothing then. So that's a fun YAML stuff that I absolutely love. Other fun things that we have here, I have port exports. So I can export or expose the port 4001 on my local system to 3000 inside of the container. Let's see, other things. Oh, depends on. So order. I can say that this app, my Express application that I built as a demo for this relies upon the database running and that it be healthy. Now, sort of like a fun thing with Docker, if I just say that it depends on database and I did not put this condition service healthy, it would wait for the container to launch. It wouldn't wait for the health check to pass. It would just wait for the container to launch and then say, good to go, here you go, start up the app. So I have to say, all right, no, actually, really, make sure it's healthy first, and then go ahead and start this up. So that's something that caught me off guard when I first started working with this. The command here allows me to override the command that's inside of the Docker file for the image. And this is super interesting for any images that maybe you don't have control over, or maybe you create a single image that's more for production, and maybe you want to do something like this that's for the Docker Compose that's more for dev side. So I wanted to run this Docker dev because it puts it more into like a watch mode where it's going to restart every time that I change the code inside of it. And then there's something brand new with Docker files, or Docker Compose, which is this Docker watch thing. So it's been in beta for a while, but it finally got released in January of this year, which is this Docker Compose watch. And it's specifically Docker Compose watch. We can't do this on its own. Like, you can't do that with just Docker itself. It has to be through Compose. And it solves a problem that we have with Mac and Windows Docker forever, pretty much. Now, Linux users, Docker, you don't have to worry about this. You can continue to sort of make fun of us non-Linux people because we don't get to run the engine directly. We have to run the entire Docker hub, or whatever this thing is called, Docker Desktop. And for those of you who don't know, Docker Desktop runs a VM behind the scenes, which that entire joke about Docker is not a VM, well, unfortunately, on Mac and Windows, it is, because they install a VM for us that Docker then runs in. And that's perfectly fine. You don't really get a huge speed loss between that and running the Docker engine directly like you can in Linux until you mount a volume. And the second that you mount a volume from your host into the Docker container on any system running a VM, you lose a tremendous amount of speed. You can't do anything about that. Docker Compose Watch changes all of that because it allows us to not have our, let's see, how do I want to put this? It allows us to not volume mount our code into the container, but still make changes to it live. Notice here, I'm missing something that our Postgres has. I don't have a volume mount. And that's what this develop is sort of taking care of for me. Let's go ahead and take a look at our Docker file for this. Now this is for the Node app here. And what I've done, the specific things to call out for this, is I am copying all of the code from the project into the into the image at, well, creation time. And that might feel a little bit weird because I want to change this, right? Like we want to develop it, I want to add some, same thing to it. I want to hit, save and then see that reflected in the code inside the container. And that's where the watch comes in, because what the watch is going to do is it's going to see that code change, and whenever anything changes, it's going to just sync the code between what I have locally and inside the container. Now, it's not going to, in this specific case, sync doesn't restart the container and it doesn't rebuild the image. But those are options. We could say for this action that I want to, let's see, do I have any code actions here? No. I don't have any help with this one here. And I can't pull up the reference to let you see what the 3 options are. But basically it is rebuild the entire image every time that you see a code change, or restart the container every time you see the code change, or do both. In this case, I just want to sync, so it just syncs the files, nothing else. It's nice. So let's do a quick demo on that. So I'm going to do a Docker compose watch. So note that this new command is not Docker compose up, it's Docker compose watch. And I have that health check. I don't need it to use the Docker compose -d or the Docker compose --wait. It sort of assumes that I want to do that with Docker compose watch. So finally something where it's assuming something that makes sense. Luckily, I built this before when I still had internet, so everything should work. Although that does look like it's trying to load metadata from docker.io. Oh. Oh, cool. If I do this, is it going to expose you? Oh, cool. Okay. All right. Technical difficulties. Let me connect to another network. I have to type that in, don't I? I don't see it.
Turn your Wi-Fi off on my phone.
There it is. Okay, that should be good. Let me try this again. There we go, we got past that state, and now we have watch enabled for this. So I should be able to make some changes to this code. So let's see, I have the status, I am super healthy here. Let's shout a little bit less. And if I hit write save, it syncs the app after changes were detected. And now that change is inside of the container, and I could mount into it and actually take a look at that, but it's there. So if you're running Docker Compose and you're doing a lot of mounting files and you're on a Mac or Windows system, highly recommend checking this out because it's going to make Docker a lot faster for you. Now, obviously, I'm doing a volume mount into my Postgres database, so I get a little bit of slowness just because of that. And unfortunately, that slowness does impact everything, even if its image is not, volume mounted. It's a penalty that you get from Docker. Let's see. Back to here. Okay, so Docker files and Docker compose let us reproduce production locally. The reason for this is because if we develop on something that looks like production, then we're going to have a much higher chance of writing something that runs on production. Far too often I've seen people write code that runs on their systems, and then you run it on usually a Linux system in AWS Cloud or GCP or DigitalOcean. It's like, oh no, it required libraries, or it required it just totally doesn't work at all. But if you run things in Docker, even if you're not going to deploy in Docker, then you have a much higher chance that things are going to run properly. Plus, I found it's a little bit easier to reproduce problems using Docker, especially if you're trying to create the exact same, or at least similar environment as production on your local system. And that's pretty much what I have. So let's go into some questions, and if you have any more of the advanced ones too, let's hear it. If I can, I'll do my best to answer it.
Right. Who's got a question? Saw this hand first. I'll come back to you.
More of a comment. Thank you so much for the watch thing, because it just solved a problem I've been trying to solve for like 2 months.
Awesome. I'm really glad to help out. I was actually building a Docker course to sell, and in January, and it popped out. I'm like, huh, I am going to add this in. So I spent several days trying to figure it out, because their documentation questionable. So if you run into any problems, feel free to reach out, and I'll do my best to help out.
So you went over some of the, first of all, thank you very much, Brooks, for the talk. You went over some of the sync features of Watch. Are those the only 3 things that it can do, or can it also provide hooks into providing other service into your Docker instance?
If I understand the question correctly, I believe that it's just for syncing the files. It's not for anything else, really. It's just solving that not needing a volume mount problem. So it's not really it's really not much of a use to Linux people, because you can volume mount with no penalty on Linux system, unless you use Docker desktop.
Yeah, so I have a question. So, what was it? Do you recommend developing within containers? Because I know with VS Code you have dev containers, and that's a big thing. But I use NeoVim, so I guess would you recommend having a base container with the editor built in and doing everything within a container, or you think it still makes more sense to do all of your development outside and then build your container around it?
Okay, so I have the realistic answer and the I am a team lead / manager answer. So the team lead manager part of me says yes, everything in a container, because if you develop everything in a container, you know it's going to run in a container, and then the entire point is you can share it with other people really easily. And if you have to put it into a different computer, that's you sharing it with yourself, and you'll love the fact that it's in a container later on. Now, if you're just building a system for yourself and it doesn't really matter, it's really easy to not do things in containers and just go off on your own. And sometimes I'll just start up a database and just have that running on its own, and then just build something outside of that, especially Rust code that I do. I'll just end up not using container, even though I probably should. Other things that are really hard to do inside of containers are anything graphics related. So if you want to write a game in Unity, that's not really going to be easy to write and have it have access to everything that needs to run properly inside the container. So for web dev stuff, we generally can do that and probably should. But even I don't actually follow through with that.
What other questions do we have? Yeah.
I just have a comment on that. The health check thing for Postgres. Actually, I wasn't using Docker. I'm getting a little feedback there. Yeah, I wasn't using Docker, but I had a similar problem too. And what I ended up solving, it's not as clean of a separation of concerns, but I moved the Postgres health check into the Node.js app. So it would still, the Node.js app would still open up, but then the first thing it would do is to try to connect to the Postgres database. And if it couldn't, it would alert unhealthy. So it wasn't as clean of a separation of concerns, but it solved my problem. It was reliable now, so I was happy with it.
Yeah, I really want to not put my health, actually don't want my code to really like care about that. I want it to just say, hey, it's gonna be up and running, don't worry about it. And then have something else care about that. But you're right, it like does feel like sometimes that's the most reliable way to do it. Although that has given me an idea, I wonder if maybe it would be better to just create a like little script, like my own program that attempts to connect to the database, and then just run that as a health check inside the container. And I can just copy that in or do something with that in to make it work. So that could potentially work too.
First question, have you used dev containers? Do you have like experience with them?
For like specifically dev containers?
Yeah, like devcontainer.com I think is their site. It's like,
Oh, no, I've never used devcontainer.com.
yeah. That's cool. Check it out if you haven't. It's cool. It's like basically they have you get like Oh My Zish and a bunch of stuff set up inside the container, and then it connects your VS Code instance to the container. So it's a better experience deving with Docker containers. And the second question, where can we learn more if we would like to learn more about Docker?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different places to learn more about Docker. Now that I have internet, thank you, CJ. Obviously, docker.com they host all the documentation for Docker, and that's, obviously the best place to start. We have Docker Hub, hub.docker.com, which has all of the, like a list of all the public, freely available to you containers. These are both official containers that are safe and containers just from any old person, myself included, which may or may not be safe. And then if you want to learn a lot more, I do have a course that I've created on my LMS platform here. And that is this Introduction to Docker, where I go a lot more into depth into Docker here. It is still an introductory course, so it may not be best for somebody who feels like a lot more advanced in it, but I have priced it fairly cheap. So if any of you are interested in that, please let me know, and I'll be happy to let you sort of like take a look at it.
We have time for 2 more questions. All right.
First off, great presentation. It was really informative. But have you ever worked with test containers? It's very similar to dev containers, but using...
I have not. Because I do spend a lot more time on sort of like the educational side, I tend to work with like just Docker Hub and just those things, because then that's more familiar to like students, but I do kind of want to check some of those other things. So what's that called? It's
test containers, but basically it allows you to spin up ephemeral Docker containers when you're running your tests in your test suite. So like for your if you needed to test your app connection to a database, you could spin up a just ephemeral Postgres database, do your reads and writes to it, and it would tear it down at the end of the test.
Oh, nice.
And you can do that on a per test case basis.
Yeah,
So-
I usually just end up setting up the entire test stuff as part of my Docker Compose. Is that testcontainers.com?
I'm not sure on the website. I'm sure if you just look up test containers, it'll come up. I think Docker just acquired it. So I think it might be built in, but yeah. Anyways, great presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Brooks.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We have one last special thing. And maybe not everyone wants to stick around, but I think it'll be really fun because will it involve a code? No? Okay, no. It won't involve a code demo tonight.
Okay, I just wanted to know. So we have this book. It's by O'Reilly. It's called Learning TypeScript, and one of you gets it for free if you want it. How many people would actually be interested in taking this book home? Raise a hand. There's a few. Okay. All right, I'll write a little giveaway script. Let's do it. Let's keep going. And if you want to leave, you can. But we're gonna do a thing. Who here has heard of TypeScript but has not used TypeScript? Do you have anyone that has not used TypeScript? Okay. Who uses TypeScript daily? Nice. That's crazy to see because it hasn't always been that way. Let me get set up real quick. If you want to grab any last pizza or a drink, and then we'll code for like 5 minutes. Check. Cool. I will code in 20 seconds. 20 seconds. All right, we are going to give away this book, but we're going to write some TypeScript to do it. So who would be interested in taking this book home? Raise a hand. We're going to write your name now. What is your name, sir? Andrew. Stephen. What's it? Emo? E-N, Enmo. I can't hear. I'm so sorry. E-L... Elmo. Okay, sorry. Eric, there we go. Is it with a K? Okay, awesome. Philip. Cool. Doi? Cool. Or how do you say it? Zoe. Nice. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right, so let's just do a quick intro to TypeScript. If you know JavaScript, you already know TypeScript. I'm going to create an index.ts file. All of our TypeScript code goes into TS files. And what I want to do is I want to describe the thing we're going to be giving this away to. And that thing is a person. I don't know why I called them a thing. But we're going to describe a person. So we're going to create a type here. And for this specific giveaway, what are the attributes of a person that we need to know? What's one thing we need to know about them? Yeah. In this case, we only have their first name. But I'm going to describe that a person has a name, and then we can describe the type. And so all the types in TypeScript are the stuff that you're used to in JavaScript. So for instance, we have like numbers. And we quote it like this. So if I want to put a number into a variable, I say colon number. If I want to put a string into a variable, I can say colon string like this. That's me. And so basically, you write JavaScript code, but everywhere you have types, you add these little annotations, and then the editor starts to help you out. So let's say I actually called these let instead of const. Now that I have clearly defined that this should be a number, if later on I go and try to put something else in there, TypeScript's going to yell at me, and it's going to say, string is not assignable to type number. So basically, it helps us with our codes. It makes sure that as we set things up later on, we use it the way that we said we were going to use it. So if I put a number in there, then it stops complaining. So I like to think of TypeScript as more as a linter, really, than a language, because this code, in order to actually run it, we have to turn it into JavaScript. There is no such thing as a TypeScript engine. There is only JavaScript engines. You have like the V8 engine in Node.js, you have Dino, you have Bun. All of those things can only run JavaScript. They cannot run TypeScript. So I got to turn this into JavaScript. What do I do? First of all, there's a couple of ways to do it. There is the TypeScript official compiler, but one way I like to run TypeScript code is with this tsx command. But all TypeScript projects are node projects, so I'm actually just going to init this, and this is going to give me a package.json, and then we can actually install TypeScript or TSX from npm. And look at that, it put all your names in the description. That's fun. One of the easiest ways to run TypeScript, especially if you're just playing around, if you do an npm install of tsx, this is TypeScript execute. This is not TSX, the React templating language, but this is a nice little CLI tool that will actually just immediately run my code. And the internet's pretty slow, so hopefully this works. If not, do I have Dino? I do have Dino. All right. It's been a long time since I used Dino, but Dino is nice because you can actually just point it at a TypeScript file. It will turn it into JavaScript, and then it'll run it. So let's see if this works. Let's see. So if I just want to log out the name here, and then I want to log out favorite number, will this code run? Dino run? Does Dino run? Hey, it works. Cool. Dino is a alternative runtime to Node.js. I guess technically, well, yeah, I was going to say, but I can't use Node.js, right? Because if I try to run this code with Node.js, anybody know what's going to happen? What error am I going to get? Let's look at the code. It's a syntax error. Yeah, where's it going to happen at? First line, yeah, right there. JavaScript's going to hit this, and it's going to be like, I don't know what to do with that. Yeah, look at that, unexpected token. So we have to turn it into JavaScript. If I can get this to install, I can show you how it's done. Does anybody know, can we transpile codes with Dino? Is there any way to just say, we've got run, bundle? What if I bundle it? Good enough for this demo, because it literally took that TypeScript file, and look at that. It just stripped away all the type annotations, right? It got rid of :number, :string, and so this would be the code that I actually send to the web browser or run in a backend. What's that? Oh, sorry. So yeah, this is TypeScript, and there's a ton more stuff you can do with it. And if you win this book, you can learn all about it. So let's write a little giveaway. But we're going to make sure that everything is nice and typed. So I'm going to say, we're going to have a function here. We're going to say get random person. And I'm going to do some contrived stuff because I want to show actually like using types here. So let's say like get person by index. And then this is a function that's going to take in an index, but that index is a number. So I'm going to annotate it like that. And then we probably are going to have some persons, so I'm just going to return persons at that index. This is contrived, but what I want to show you is how this will work. So let's say we have persons, and we define it as an array. Now, by default, earlier I showed you putting a type directly on the thing. You don't actually have to do that. You can see that TypeScript is inferring the type here as never, because there's not anything in it. But if I did put a person in there, like Andrew, hi. And I said their name is like this, but as a string. Now if we look at it, you can see that TypeScript is now inferring the type, and it's saying that persons is an array of objects that have a name property that is a string. And this is another aspect of TypeScript, is it uses duck typing. So if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. If it walks like a person and talks like a person, it's a person. So even though I didn't specify the type here, they're described in the same way, so they actually overlap. But if I want to be explicit, I could actually say persons is an array of person like that. That'd be the best way to do it. Okay, let's add all the people. And let's use some editor foo to do it. All right, here we go. How am I going to do this? I'm going to put all the names in. I want a cursor on each line. I want to wrap them all in quotes. I want to give them all a name. I want to start them like that, end them like that, and then good to go. Great. So we have all these persons. Now, we're going to get person by index. Before that, we need to get a random index. Random index. Free sticker to someone who can tell me the JavaScript codes to get a random index. What do you have? Math.random, okay. And then, what do we do? How many? Yeah, so multiply persons.length. Cool. One last thing I have to do. Yeah, so remove the decimal. Math.floor. Great, you get a free sticker. So this should give us a random index from 0 to length -1 in the array. For now, let's just log this out and then run the... Let's make sure. Andrew, Steven, Elmo, Eric, Phil. Okay, cool. We got all our people in there. This thing's still running, but we can use Dino. 3, 0, 1. Okay. Sadly, you didn't win that time because we need to actually call our function. So we're going to say, and we're going to rename this to get, exactly. We've got to be very descriptive. Get winner by index. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. And actually, I mean, let's, before we show the winner, let's show some TypeScript here, right? So you can see that because I defined my function to accept a number there, TypeScript's complaining. It's like, hey, expected one argument, but you didn't give me anything, so we have to pass a number in. So we're going to pass in that random index. All right, can we get a drum roll, please? Elmo, congrats. Sweet. That was fun. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I think that's all we got. Is there any pizza left? Not really? Okay. Well, get home safe. Help us put away the chairs if you can. And actually, we will see you next month. So the details for next month's meetup are already there. We have one of the co-creators of Astro. He's going to be giving a talk. The site won't load, but I forget what his talk is. But we'd love to see you here next month. Check out meetup.com, DenverScript.com. Be well. Oh yeah, I'll give you a sticker.